I'm Ruth Tecle, and I'm here with Alan Small, leader of the Libertarian Party, and that party's candidate in the riding of Markham-Unionville. Welcome to TVO.
Thank you.
All right, so tell me a little bit about the Libertarian platform.
The Libertarian platform, we have 5 planks, but essentially what they all drive around is the idea that Libertarians believe in individual liberty, which we think can be carried out best by limited government, free markets, and personal responsibility, really.
Okay, so why should the Ontario government be limited and opened up to competition?
Well, once upon a time, the Ontario government was much smaller than it is, and it had a much smaller budget, and there was no hue and cry back then to say, oh, we need more government, we need more government. What happened is that government grew because, people thought, maybe we should use the government to do this rather than have it being done voluntarily. Many of the things that we do now were once done voluntarily in a local community. So.
Okay. So limiting the size and scope of government,
yeah.
You talked a little bit about that, and opening up government services to competition. It's very closely aligned to the Freedom Party platform. How would you differentiate the two parties? They're also fielding candidates in this election.
Sure. Well, I'd say, and maybe that's different from what they'd say, I'd say we're very, very, very similar. In fact, once upon a time, the two parties were one back in the early 80s, and a little disagreement caused a rift, and they became a different party. I think it was initially called the Un-Party.
The Un-Party, that's right.
And then they became the Freedom Party. But, in practical terms, if you look at our policies, maybe not exactly, but if you look at the policies, you would really have a tough time distinguishing between the two. And even when candidates speak at all candidates meetings, and there's a freedom candidate and there's a libertarian candidate, they're often the same in terms of what they would do, except they think that we are anarchists, which I don't understand. Do I look like an anarchist? I
can't tell.
I would call myself a classical. You can't tell. Well, some people. I'm not. I'm a classical liberal in the old sense, where in the Laurier sense, he was a classical liberal. The trouble is the idea of liberal has been co-opted and it's impossible to understand now what it means. That you can't distinguish between liberal and socialism. They're so close together, but I'm a liberal.
You're a liberal. Well, have you ever thought of extending that olive branch if you guys are so closely aligned? Or?
Oh, it's not. I think it would be. Yes, absolutely. I mean, to the Freedom Party for sure. We've asked them, but they call us anarchists. Okay. So I'm not going to argue. They go to such an extent that on their website there is a place you can go and you can find out the difference between libertarianism and the Freedom Party.
Okay.
We don't have that spot on our website, which tells you a big difference between us and them.
Okay, so moving on, you have candidates in 73 ridings out of 107 ridings across Ontario.
Yep.
Last time it was 51 seats. What do you think it is about your party that's resonating with candidates and attracting more?
Oh, I think the pendulum is finally shifting in the other direction. We've had 50, 60 years, mostly in my lifetime, of government growth. When I was a student, government was not the be-all and end-all. It was, back in the 50s and 60s, things were very different. And we were still civilized, and Canada functioned, and Ontario was the engine of Canada. And then over the years, and I think it initiated with the Liberals again. It was a Trudeau idea, and I liked Trudeau initially because of his social ideas, the idea that the nation does not belong in the bed, or the government does not belong in the bedrooms of the nation. I certainly agree with that. But his economic policies are faulty. You can't continue to extract money from people to pay for monopoly services. And monopolies are just bad, whether they're government monopolies or corporate monopolies. So, you know, there's no, the problem is service is always better when you have options, choices. And so there are, yes, where there are government monopolies, but I'd like to see people have choices, even within even if the government monopolies must exist, people should have other options.
Okay, that might relate to the next point I'll bring. I'm going to read a quote from your party's healthcare platform,
right,
and we'll chat about that. So the Libertarian platform states, healthcare should be the responsibility of individuals and their families in consultation with their chosen physicians. People in need of medical care should have as many options as possible for diagnostics and treatment. To make medical care more affordable, sustainable, and accessible, competition and innovation must be introduced at every level. To do this, government must be removed from the equation as much as possible. So
that's good. I wrote that.
Yeah, you wrote this. Okay. So how does removing government from healthcare make it more affordable and sustainable and accessible?
Well, you know, don't you if the government is the middleman, it's a step away from what should be just a relationship between the patient and the physician. Putting the government in the center between the two has not made it easier. I mean, we have yes, a public access and access to health care, free access to health care, apparently. I mean, everybody says it is. But the reality is the access to health care gives you the opportunity to have health care, but it doesn't give you quick and easy health care. I mean, if you had to wait if you went to a restaurant and you had to wait for service as long as you sometimes have to wait for service in healthcare, you'd leave the restaurant, you go to another restaurant. Well, we have no choice here in Ontario. You can go to the United States, you can go to another country, sure, but people can't afford to do that. It would be nice to have a private option, have the public system, give people access, particularly people who can't afford it. But there are people that can afford it. And if you take those people and you give them an option, they will say, okay, well, maybe I would prefer the option, pay a little more, go over there. This line becomes smaller. The smaller line, even the poor people who weren't able to afford it will get access much quicker.
Okay, so you do believe in having a government role in healthcare, but also other options as well.
We would prefer the government not have a role in healthcare ultimately, but I think if you look at other places, particularly in Europe and Asia, Japan, for example, you'll find that every other nation has public access healthcare, the same as we do here in Ontario, but they also have a private option everywhere. And they do much better in terms of delivering service. I mean, Ontario, again, just in the last couple of days, there was a report that came out that the wait lists are way too long here compared to the rest of the world. And the rest of the world does the same thing. I mean, we're talking about public access health care, and yet how do they do it? Well, why is it that none of the three big parties are talking about, let's look at another model, a model in another country, and say, those models maybe work better than ours, maybe we should try that. And there's a number of things that we would like to see done right away to change the public system here in Ontario.
Okay, interesting. I didn't know that you were still considering that option of having public.
Well, it's here.
It's here.
It's here. I think just out of compassion's sake, you need to care for the people that can't be cared for. That makes sense to me. We're not without compassion, but I think there's a lot of people that can get care. You know, I've taken my elderly mother to emergency, and she's had to wait there a very long time. And I can tell you, she can afford, she's 95, she can afford to pay a couple of bucks to get out of the emergency to get access to a doctor much faster than she was able to.
So let's talk about another government service, transit. I didn't find that outlined in your platform. Could you tell me a little bit about your transit policy?
Well, you know, government is in so many things we don't know where to start. I mean, we just have 5 planks. Transit wasn't isn't there, but I'll tell you, I live in Markham, Unionville. I live in Unionville actually, and transit there is horrible. Most people use cars anyway, but in recent years, in the last 4 years now, they've been building this transit way up the middle of Highway 7, which is a major east-west thoroughfare in Markham, and it's a bus thoroughfare. So people are going to take this, and it's beautiful. I mean, it's just great. There's computers that tell you when the next bus is going to come, and it's all, it's very user-friendly. But most people still will prefer their car, and why is that? Well, waiting out there in the middle of the winter is the primary reason. So there are ways you can improve that. Why have one bus service? I mean, the actual system up there is a public-private partnership. The government plus a bus company, which they hire, one bus company. Why not have 2 bus companies or 3? It makes sense to have this busway, which is going to be empty much of the time, to be used by more than one bus company, possibly offering slightly different service, maybe a door-to-door service, which will really get people out of cars. If that's your goal, make it really desirable to leave the car behind and use public transit. Don't just say, okay, get out of your car and you must use this bus, and here is the fare. I'd like to see a little more competition in that respect.
So more competitions, but also including the government. The
government, they're there. I'd ultimately like to see the government phased away. I mean, there's no reason the government belongs in business. There's so many things that, you know, if the government was involved in food, we'd have shortages of food and long lineups to get it. But fortunately, they're not.
Okay. So moving on, historically speaking, Ontario has never elected a Libertarian MPP.
Right.
Why don't you tell our viewers why you believe now is the time to have a Libertarian MPP?
Well, obviously a Libertarian voice in the legislature will be heard more frequently, and typically we're ignored. Even though we're a party that upholds some of the fundamental traditions that built this country. We're talking about free markets. That's what built the country. The country was not built by governments. It was built by hardworking people who were able to compete with one another, fail, succeed on their own merit. That's the kind of thing that built Canada. And since government has grown, the opposite has happened. I mean, Ontario is no longer a have province. We're a have-not province. We actually get help from Ottawa, from the western provinces. You're looking at the possibility, if we have a Libertarian candidate in the legislature, of someone that would point this out to people and say, look, there's too much money going here. This bill should not pass. There's no such voice. Right now, the 3 major parties in the legislature, they all sing by the same songbook, and they're all cut from the same cloth. Each one believes that big government is the way to fix everything. Well, we don't believe that.
Okay. Well, thanks for joining us in the studio, Alan. And there you have it, Alan Small, leader of the Libertarian Party.
Thank you.